We're back live with the Food for Thought live series. I always get the wrong hand because it's a mirror image. Food for Thought live, welcome back everybody, and thank you so much again for joining. It's a beautiful day in England. I don't know where in the world you all are. I know that we've had people joining us from California, from Spain, from South Africa, from all over the world. And here in England today, we have got beautiful, sunny, hot weather, unseasonably warm, and it's beautiful. So I'm very excited about that. I hope you're all happy, staying safe, staying healthy. As always, this Food for Thought live series is all about bringing you people who inspire me and who I hope will inspire you too, and who will empower you. Between us, we will be able to continue our actions, our positive, proactive actions in the animal welfare, animal conservation, animal rescue space, in the vegan movement, whatever it may be that you stand for. We want to give you the means to keep standing for it, even though things are very different in the world right now, that perhaps we can't dip into our pockets and give out a contribution that we might normally do. Let's just stay together and figure out ways of staying proactive, staying focused, and helping the voiceless, which of course we all love and cherish so much. So with that in mind, as always, as I said, I've tried to find you guests who I know will absolutely inspire you, because they inspire me very much. And these guys who I'm about to introduce you to, I've had the privilege of hearing them talk in person, and I've also seen them talk online, and I adore what they stand for in every way. And I'm going to let them talk about it and explain in more detail what I'm referring to. But what I find really beautiful about their attitude is this holistic approach that they've got. I hear them talk quite often about the need that we human beings have to find a way to peacefully coexist with everything we share this planet with, and indeed the planet itself, and to stop or to move away from this idea that we have dominion over land, animals, the planet itself, and to see them as a commodity or something to be traded. And with that, I want to introduce you to the very wonderful Simon Borchert and Shannon Elizabeth from the Shannon Elizabeth Foundation. Hey guys.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Really good. It's so great to have you on. I'm so grateful to you guys. And as I said, I've had the privilege of hearing you speak before, and the fact that you're going to come talk to people on this broadcast is just such an honor for me. Thank you. How's life over there?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
It's awesome to connect. I mean, you're talking about how wonderful the weather is there, and I think we've got our first day of proper winter in Cape Town.
Yeah.
And it's miserable as hell. It's probably a 4.7 outside.
Wow.
Rain down at 60 degrees angle. But yeah, I've never heard a farmer complain about the rain, so we'll take it.
Well, hey, and never will I complain about the fact that it's warmer in London than it is in Cape Town.
Yeah.
And of course, Shannon, you're from Texas, right? But you lived a lot of your life in Hollywood, of course, or in Los Angeles at least.
Yeah. And I think Cape Town's weather is very, very similar to Los Angeles. Like the cold isn't as cold as New York, it's LA cold, and the warm is kind of the same to me too. So I feel right at home here. Good. Well, they're lucky to have you, and we're lucky to have you. Not just you guys individually, but also the Shannon Elizabeth Foundation, which is obviously what you guys represent. You guys are the lifeblood of the Shannon Elizabeth Foundation, and I'd love for you to introduce, the idea behind it and the way that it started, perhaps. And as you do, I'm going to invite everyone, as I always do, to follow along on Facebook and on Twitter, and I'll keep on sharing the links you'll see right down there. But over to you guys. Tell us a little bit about the foundation. Well, it started actually as a dog and cat rescue in Los Angeles in 2001. And I ran it that way for over 10 years, and then just knew I wanted to help more animals on a much bigger scale and really utilize my platform in the best way I could. And I went on this soul-seeking journey and ended up in South Africa. I started hearing about the poaching crisis, and something clicked in me. I saw a video of an elephant that was poached, and she was still alive. and she was out all night suffering, and it flipped a switch in me, and I said, I can't do nothing in my lifetime knowing that this is going on. And I mean, I'd been to South Africa once before, and I still had no idea that this was happening. So I started coming out to Africa after that. And I went to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and over a couple trips, and decided, you know, I'm gonna move. I feel like I'm closer to the issues when I'm here. I can meet more people and understand it better. Do good if I'm on the ground here. So in the end of 2016, I moved. And then over the course of the next year and a half, I met Simon and his dad, and we kind of rebranded the whole organization and the focus, and we looked at what all of our strengths were and how could we collectively bring something to conservation that wasn't another organization competing, because that's not what we want to do. We want to add to the conversation. We want to help people. We want to help people on the ground already doing great work. So it was about, you know, where do we see gaps in conservation that we can bring something to? So that's kind of how we started to form all of our in-house initiatives and really looking at all our strengths.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, you know, to pick up from that, I'm very fortunate. I kind of grew up in the bush. I grew up in a family of conservationists and a family of media people and publishers. So we've been entrenched in kind of the storytelling of Africa and conservation as a family for 4+ decades, I guess. And what we had seen after a while was that where was the glass ceiling? Where were the real challenges? And a couple of big things stuck out for us. We identified that a lot of conservation media and data tends to be very academic, and it tends to be very heavy and bulky and quite difficult to digest. So there was a barrier between people that cared about the planet but were unsure how to translate that into action. So there was a disconnect between the world of conservation and the people that we collectively need to mobilize to exact changes that every conservation NGO is fighting tooth and nail to achieve. The other thing that we saw was that there needed to be, you know, to Shannon's point, there needed to be more unity in conservation, and not just this environment where conservationists tend to talk to each other. We needed to broaden the conservation conversation and to take it further. And what we realized was that there was a very strong synergy between Shannon's storytelling skills and a very, very broad, fantastic appeal and following, and then the very deep credibility that came with my father's career in particular. Peter Borchert, he spent the last 3-4 decades writing some of the most important pieces about the continent, and has gathered a very enviable reputation for being incredibly objective, and hugely integrous in how he's gone about telling these stories. So we said, cool, let's put this in the potjie pot and let's see what flavors can come from it. And so we decided on 4 key verticals that we focus on, 4 sort of pillars, and to paraphrase another South African, Raymond Ackerman, the 4 legs of our table. You know, what holds us up. And the first thing we looked at was we could do something around the education and awareness space. So we're creating a series of what we call reviews, which is taking a specific, or a species-specific, or an environmental challenge or crises, and unpacking it and making it digestible, and creating an ongoing space where people can join the conversation. It's not a moment in time. It's not a singular academic paper that's put out there. It becomes a repository of credible and consistently updated information that is structured in a way that people can dive in, take a bite out of it, sound like $1 million, like they know everything they need to know at a dinner party, or it can inform policy. We've deliberately made it as accessible as possible. And so the first version of that is Rhino Review, which we launched a couple of months back. And it is an account of the 55 million years of the history of rhino as we know it, and then goes into our relationship with rhino and how did we get into this mess. And then we make the point, and again, hopping back to what Shannon was saying about trying to make sure that the good people in conservation are supported, because quite often guys with really good Instagram accounts are getting way too much attention, and more attention than they deserve. And the people that are doing the real work on the ground are not getting the support they need. And so how can we contribute to that? How can we contribute to that? So this was our way of making sure that we could get as many people involved as possible and create a platform that we could showcase the good people's work and make sure that we can try and direct as much support to them as possible.
Right.
Look at our youth empowerment program, which is the namesake of Shannon's foundation, Animal Avengers.
Right.
And there we're looking at some cool stuff. We'll be launching a scholarship fund for young, previously disadvantaged young women in Africa to get into the conservation sciences and to get into conservation and wildlife management. We've got a very patriarchal conservation system, I think, throughout a lot of Africa. But the most powerful people on the ground are people like Petronel Nevert at Care for Wild, Johanna Pretorius, Karen Trendler, Shannon. They're amazing, strong women on the ground, and we need to emulate that. We need to showcase those incredible people as role models and make sure that more and more women can come into the industry as much as possible.
And just to say, on the screen right now it says animalavengers.org, but we've just updated our site. It's actually shannonelizabeth.org now.
Amazing. So, all right.
And it's still up, but I'm going to end up pointing it towards Shannon.
Amazing. Well, Giles, don't you worry. Giles will get that as well. So shannonelizabeth.org is perfect. And that probably answers the question which has just come through from Linda. How can you get literature on rhino? Is it available to obtain? So that's where they go for the information you're talking about, right?
No, rhinoreview.org, actually.
Yeah. Rhino Review.
Rhino Review.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Great. Okay, well, we'll get that up on screen as well for you. And so, because one of the things, I think people are getting a sense of exactly why I introduced you as having a very holistic approach already, because you're covering a number of legs of the table, which is a fantastic approach, as the way you put it. But one of the themes that I'm hearing consistently, you've both said the word conversation a lot, and I've heard you talk before, and I understand the importance you place on discussion, sensible conversation and discussion. And as you said, you're trying to equip people with the information that they need to have a sensible conversation, aren't you? I mean, you guys seem to be doing a fantastic job of that, as well as everything else.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things that we were seeing is, for me to understand really what was happening, I had to spend time here, move here, and not everyone can come here and get that information firsthand. Right. And we started seeing a lot of things where people, friends of mine in the US would support people that just had a good social media game, but on the ground here, we know they're not doing everything they say that they're doing. And so we looked at that and we said, well, how can we start to help people understand better, get that information and really know what's happening and what's important here. And that was kind of part of what sparked us starting Rhino Review and many others, because one of the things we're going to be doing with it as it matures is helping people to know who are the people on the ground in various areas of rhino conservation doing amazing work and getting results. So we have that kind of in the pipeline going, because a lot of people want to help, but they feel like they're donating into a black hole sometimes and they don't know where their money goes. And right. I think transparency is so key in this day and age. You need to know what's happening. And the more you know and the more you're involved, the more you're going to want to help and want to give. And that's what conservation needs right now. It needs everyone to band together, to know what's working, to know who's safe to support and where your money's going. And then hopefully you do get to come out one day and see how amazing these animals are.
It's also... I think in the sort of the age of social media, we've lost our way a little bit. I think we take for granted that we have access to information, But I think we've lost the imperative of demanding an access to truth above an access to a volume of information. So we've ended up with an environment where I think people cherry pick data or loosely reference scientific data to substantiate a predisposed position over what they believe or what is comfortable, what doesn't challenge them, and then they're able to perpetuate that. And we tend to end up being quite entrenched in our own opinions rather than creating an environment that is safe and okay to learn. I think we've got to find a courage as a society to be able to put your hand up and go, you know what, I actually don't know. I don't understand this, but I know it's quite shitty what we're doing to the planet, and I want to learn more. Instead of having this societal demand that we've got to have an opinion, and we've got to stand for something. Like, we want to stand for education. We want to stand for get the right information, demand the truth, because we've only got one crack to use that truth for any good measure. And I think that also goes to context. It's very easy for us to say how important it is to protect rhino for the sake of rhino, for the sake of African communities. But it's very difficult to mobilize a global network around that narrative. I think what we need to do is to find ways of connecting people to the context of conservation. And in one of our other verticals, we've got a permanent presence in DC, in Washington, where we spend an increasingly large amount of time working almost as advisors to congressmen and women and senators, where we're talking more about what is the relevance and what is the consequence of legislative decision making, and not walking in and saying, please don't hurt the fluffy bunnies. That narrative is lost. But when we walk in and say, this is about national security. So if I can draw a parallel between the ivory trade and potential links to Boko Haram, ISIS, etc., then we're talking about a national security level. Now, does that get your attention? And suddenly you've got even the most ardent red tie people in DC suddenly going, hold on a second, this does affect me. And I should give a shit, and I'm going to. And this is how we can go about sharing information. So we don't care what logo is on the door, as long as people are getting truth, that's what we stand for.
Yeah. Gosh, I was going to say something in there as well about, what were you talking about just before that? I wanted to make a point about making decisions on what you buy as a consumer. But what were you saying just before that? Because I lost my train of thought.
Context.
See, this is why I write stuff, because you guys, I write stuff down because you make such great points, and I'm like, I want to mention that, I want to mention that, I want to mention that, and I know I won't, because you make so, and Shannon, when you remember what the piece you wanted to pick up on from Simon, just jump right back in. But I just found it really interesting there again, where you're talking about this, just a really simple foundational principle of people getting truthful factual information. And what an astonishing reality it is that's not a given. That's not a given. So one of the places people can get that truth is from you guys. And what I wanted to ask is, where else can people go?
I just thought of it. So he was talking about oh gosh, I'm gonna lose it. No, hold on. Oh, he was talking about how, we punish people for trying sometimes. And as a consumer, I mean, we're all consumers. In everything we buy, we're a consumer. And I think so often you'll see a company trying to do good. But if they're not 100% doing good on every level, then they get criticized and bombarded, and it makes people not want to try. And I think that we need to look at the companies that are doing good and are trying, and they don't have to be perfect. They're on a journey just like we're on a journey. And we need to look at our choices and what we're buying and support the people that are trying, because they're on that path. And it's like, okay, so they're doing some stuff to help the planet here, but maybe they still have leather in their line, but they're getting there, so they're helping the rainforest. And it takes people like us to say, we love what you're doing and we hope you're going here, perhaps. But rather than just slamming them and getting mad because they're not doing everything perfectly, it's all a process. And even with veganism, we see it a lot where, you know, people used to say to me, oh, you say you're vegan, but you're wearing leather shoes. I'm like, no, I'm not. But, you know, even if I was, that's part of a journey, because in the very beginning, I was vegetarian first. I wasn't fully vegan. And then I was vegan, but I hadn't gotten rid of all my old leather stuff yet, but I wasn't buying new leather stuff. And it became this process. And I see it with other friends too, that you do it and you take that step when you're ready. And I think we need to support people in their journey and businesses in their journey. It's really, really important. So that's what I wanted to say.
And it's a great point. And it's something.
Oh, and you're frozen.
You guys froze for just a second, but you should be able to hear me and see me now. Hopefully you can. Okay, good. I think it's a very valid point you make. And, you know, it's something that we do see a lot of, and you see it across the board. You see it on the individual level, as you described, with someone who's on their path towards veganism. A lot of people will get slammed, as you just described, for not going 100% on day one. But then where does that leave ideas like Meatless Monday? And Meatless Monday is just one day of the week, potentially out of 7, where people aren't going to eat meat. But if everyone did that, that's the equivalent of 1 billion people going vegan. Because there's 7 billion plus people on the planet, and one day of the week, if everyone was doing Meatless Monday, can you imagine? And how detrimental to that whole movement would it be if those people were slammed because they're not doing Tuesday through Sunday as well?
Right. I think that, you know, Shannon's 100% right. I'll use myself as sample of one, as an example, where how, you know, we vilify effort, but we ignore apathy, and how difficult it is to transcend that when so much in your society is built around tradition and built around cultural attachments and all of these things. So as a South African, meat is cultural, and a meat diet is cultural through and through. It is more than just a braai, a South African braai, which is fun, and it's a wonderful social construct. But the moment you take meat out of it, I mean, I had a host of friends that kind of just looked at me and went, "Who are you, and what have you done with Simon?" It was a weird transition because people didn't quite understand that it's actually okay. Like, just because I don't eat meat, like, we can still talk, it's fine. And it's breaking down those kind of social barriers where people fall into stereotypes. So vegans have got to be very careful not to be preachy, and meat eaters have got to be very careful not to judge and not to use the straw argument, you know, the straw man argument of saying, well, you wear a leather belt, so therefore what? So does that mean that's acceptable for you to carry on eating meat? Because I don't, but I wear a leather belt, so that somehow excuses you. Right. It doesn't make sense. We've got to start taking responsibility for our own journey and our own path, and make decisions that are a little bit binder and kinder and a little bit more empathetic than they were yesterday, and support each other. And
perhaps part of that journey, especially here in South Africa, what I tell people is, it's what I'm most against is factory farming. That's what's gotten so bad. But here in South Africa, if you really, really want meat, there are some great local farms you can call, you can talk to the butcher, you know how your meat was raised and where it comes from, you know everything from beginning to end, and it's not part of that factory farming industry. And that's the industry that's gotten so barbaric more than anything. And so if people really want to eat meat, I tell them to look for something like that. Just don't go to the store and buy something off the shelf. There's a massive difference. There are levels to everything. And I mean, it's not right for us. We don't want to eat meat. But if somebody does, we'll encourage them to eat the right kind of meat.
I also think that, and Shannon proved it with me, is that there is a natural progression to that. is that the moment you make that decision of going, I'm going to be conscious over the treatment of how other people have treated my food, and you start to become aware of the radical cruelty and dysfunction of an entire industry, and that you are fueling that industry, it sets you on a path. So you suddenly go, okay, well, I'm going to be a lot more clinical, and I'm going to be a lot more fastidious about where I procure meat from. So you go down this path of trying to find the most organic, the most this, the most that. And then after a while you go, but hold on a second, that is actually still the same problem. It's part of the same lack of value chain here. Sure. And so you start to diminish things. You start to go on to Meatless Monday, and you're suddenly on a journey. That's what happened with me. I stopped eating meat not because I felt any kind of nutritional benefit in doing so. I was still
in the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning, I was still that guy. Like, no, humans are omnivores. We're not, but that's where I was. And it was a journey. So I'd started to cut things out of my diet, and between Shannon's wonderful influence and a wonderful friend of ours, who's a very celebrated vegan, Damien Mando from the International Anti-Poaching Federation, the Akashinga days in Zimbabwe. Yeah. He said something that just literally just hit me between the eyes. He said, "Well, if you want to protect animals, stop eating them." And I was kind of like, really? Yeah, you kind of got me there.
It's not a bad point, is it?
And I put the steak knife down, and that was it.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting point.
There,
Yeah, exactly, and it's interesting because Simon, you're giving your example there as a South African man and living in a culture where meat eating, let's be honest, is more of a cultural thing than it is perhaps elsewhere in the world, and less accepted to step away from that. As you said, people were literally saying, "Who are you and what have you done with our friend Simon?" By the way, everyone, that's Peanut. That's Peanut right there.
This is Peanut.
And I will also tell you at this point, because we had this discussion before we went live, is that Shannon and Simon have very, very graciously given me their blessing to spin the camera around if Kiki makes an appearance.
Yes.
In fact, it was more of a demand.
Absolutely.
Yes. But that whole point you're just making about South Africa and about the people's receptiveness or not to you taking the journey you took towards veganism. And there's a kind of a cliche involved, and I wanted to bring that up just at that moment because you mentioned Damien Mando, and for those of you who don't know Damien, an absolutely amazing frontline hero, literally. He's an Australian ex-Special Forces. He runs Akashinga, which is a female-only anti-poaching brigade in Zimbabwe, as Simon was referring to. So if there ever was another broken cliche, as in he's broken that stereotype, he's shattered it in the way that you have, where you're talking about an Australian man's man, ex-Special Forces, military trained killer who's dedicated his life to the protection of the voiceless, and he's vegan, and he said to someone like Simon, if you want to protect animals, stop eating them. That what a beautiful shattering of a cliche and a stereotype. It
was beautiful. It was profound. And he also speaks extensively about speciesism being as reprehensible as racism or sexism. And I think bizarrely we all kind of we're all guilty of that, and it's something that I've been pondering on a lot. I think in the lockdown of COVID-19 in South Africa, we have a lot of time at home to think. Literally can't go out. But one of the things that hasn't, an observation that hasn't been lost on me is that we are all dangerously close and somehow responsible for perpetuating a double standard around the world. We will sit and quite rightly object and demand change for things like the Yulin Dog Festival and the horrendous treatment of animals there. And the wet markets that have largely put us in this predicament that the world is facing right now. And yet we'll sit down to a steak dinner, and people in India are going, oh, how can you possibly do that? That's a sacred animal.
Right.
And so we've engendered this space where we are right and you are wrong, that somehow there is a difference. Somehow how we treat factory farmed animals is okay as long as you object to what's happening in Asia. And I think that there needs to be a real honest, retrospective, introspective moment of going, hold on a second here, we can make decisions that change this fundamentally across the planet. And it comes down to what Shannon was saying earlier. I think one of the 4 ways that you can really shift the needle is through consumer will. I believe that if you really want to change environmental issues quickly and en masse, is if you have the political will, the religious will, the cultural will, or the consumer will. And I think we underestimate what I call what I call kind of blue collar philanthropy. There is a space in the middle where we've created this idea that philanthropy is the domain of Bill Gates, who's made more money than anyone could possibly count, and that he's given a vast amount of that back to various causes. And then on the other hand, you've got a Mother Teresa character that is destitute, poor, all but living on a dime. And those are the elements of philanthropy. You've either got to have it all or have nothing. And
Right.
then you somehow authenticate it as someone that cares and can care abundantly. And we forget that the predominant mass of people sits in the middle. The people that are so focused on paying school fees and how are they going to get to the end of the month and how they're going to put food on the table. And I believe that if we can shift the consciousness of those people, because they've got the greatest power, they are the strongest group of consumers on the planet. If we choose collectively to better identify where and how we spend money on the things that we buy, the food that we buy, the plastic that we refuse, all of those things combined is the greatest indicator of how quickly we can change these paradigms. So my big hope is that we kind of start to see that as a real opportunity. And if we can couple that with just an awakening of going, hold on a second here, we can all improve. Like I don't want to run the risk of being a hypocrite of saying, well, support people on their journey, but damn you for doing this. It's a very fine line. But what we do believe is saying that if you become aware and you allow yourself to be conscious about the consumer decisions that you are making, then everybody has room to improve. We might be vegan. There's no leather. There's no nothing. We don't have leather car seats. We'll do everything we can. But at the same time, we still fly a lot of airplanes. We still travel a lot. So there are things that we can do to improve what we are doing to the planet. So it's not a destination-driven concept. It's an effort-driven concept.
Right. One interesting you touched upon that, because my recent guest, Will Travers from the Born Free Foundation, who, as you guys know, and were due to meet him, but thanks to the lockdown, were unable to. And I sent him your regards on our broadcast, and he asked me to send his to you. So
Thank you.
And he spoke about this same subject in terms of the change that's taken place in the world and the way that we now all have to review how we interact. And he brought travel up, and he talked about he actually coined a really lovely phrase that someone else had used, and to my regret, I can't remember who this needs to be attributed to, but Will shared this phrase that someone talked about: they will no longer be partaking in disposable travel. And I thought that was a really lovely way to put it. Yeah. A really lovely way to sort of say, yes, of course, there's still things to be done. There's still places we've got to go, but not necessarily the way he described it, not necessarily taking those 10 city breaks a year, to go to a different European destination just because you can. And, here in London, for example, we're 2 hours away from a multitude of different European destinations, but only if we fly. Unnecessary car journeys, let's walk, let's take bikes. And this pandemic seems to have, and the lockdown that's come along with it, seems to have, if nothing else, it's forced that to happen. We talked before we went live about the realities of whether it will force an awakening or a conscious shift in people, which is questionable. But what it has absolutely forced is you can't, as you guys have already said, you can't go out. So you're going to have to change your lifestyle. Things have changed, and it's changed for long enough that it feels like people will definitely come out the other end of this with a much clearer understanding of how little they actually need. And disposable travel may be one of those things. Coming out of it, what do you guys feel like you'll do different? Do you feel like are there specific things you've already kind of figured out is going to be different in the long term, or are you just going to evolve into it and see how it goes?
I mean, for me, I'm really hoping that we can do more things like this over the internet and not have to travel for meetings, you know? I mean, lucky for us, we work from home, but I'm hoping overall that a lot of people can start working from home regularly rather than traveling just to go to an office when it can be done from home and save all of that car travel, that daily traffic. All of that daily traffic that's happening. I mean, I know that a lot of the meetings that we need to do when we travel, if it's just meeting, we can do it this way. Like I think it's more and more acceptable. And I mean, even for me as an actress, I can do auditions now more and more this way. People are wanting that, whereas before it was always better to go in and meet in person. But now that everyone's doing this, I mean, I think it's great. It's just more accepted now.
I think that I think that Will's really hit on a really, really powerful concept there, because I think a lot of disposable travel is the responsibility of many corporates and many businesses, and we've proven that when we have to figure it out, we do, and that we don't need to travel as much as we do. So I think that there is a great opportunity to cut down on business or corporate travel in that sense. But what I do hope also happens from this is not necessarily that leisure tourism gets diminished as a result of this. I don't think I put that in the same equation. I think that they're two separate discussions. Because what I do hope comes out of this is that I think we're going to be reminded of just what an unbelievable privilege it is to be on the other side of the world and to see and meet and hear and interact with different people and see beautiful animals and see amazing places. And I think that ambassadorship for the planet is critical at the moment. We need to see and fall in love with the natural world again if we're going to stand a chance of mobilizing the public en masse to make concerted efforts and to demand changes in our leadership to take this seriously. So I think that tourism has the potential to become more sacred in that sense. So our dog, I don't know if you could hear it, but he is snoring.
Is he? No, I can't hear him. I wish we could. You should put him up by the mic. Well, that will probably wake him up.
Did you hear that?
I can't hear it. I'm really disappointed.
If I move him, then he'll wake up.
Yeah, no, don't wake him up. That's just beautiful. Literally have a sleeping peanut.
Coming on to this, going to your question, sorry.
No, that was...
I mean, I'll let you talk about this, but I was going to say the same thing. There are so many places on this planet that depend on tourism for their livelihood.
Right.
You know,
at least not Africa.
That's the only thing that keeps people employed. And I mean, that's a big thing here in South Africa.
Yeah.
I think we need to be really mindful of this, is that the health pandemic is going to be is going to be minuscule, dare I say, the economic fallout that's happened as a result of the many decisions, sensible and otherwise, that we've collectively taken as global citizens to remedy the situation. And in that, you know, Shannon's 100% right. If we take South Africa as an example, we're just on 9% of our GDP is derived through leisure-based tourism, or tourism in collectively, sorry.
Yeah.
And when that is completely eradicated, we are in a reality where the state-owned conservation areas remain well-funded and they remain well-resourced to deal with this period. And conservationist rangers, etc., have been deemed essential services, and they've been able to go about their business successfully. But what we're seeing is that in the private sector, farms and reserves and so on, where tourism is the single largest funder, if not the only funder of private conservation, when that is eradicated, we suddenly see with absolute clarity that issues of conservation are socio-economic. Conservation is the consequence of an action. And I think in many parts of Africa, that action is how do you protect habitat through the upliftment of the communities that live on the periphery of those conservation areas that have for decades, if not centuries, been excluded from the conservation economy. So what we're seeing is that tourism is one of the largest sectors in terms of job creation and economic growth. Right. And when we have this reality that COVID comes and eradicates the tourism sector, we're eradicating the very budgets that we require to protect those habitats. And we protect them by the employment of people. And those rangers, those anti-poaching units are now compromised. And as a result, the land is vulnerable. And with in South African context, with an economy that is just in free fall, we're going to see not just issues of poaching in terms of the organized syndicates operating out of Asia, but we're also going to see potentially the bushmeat industry going, not an industry, but the bushmeat challenge just going through the roof as people just are looking for food. And we desperately concerned that we need to put measures in place to mitigate the risks that the writing's on the wall. We're staring down the barrel of potentially the worst period of poaching since, and if not ever, since 2008, if not ever. That is on our doorstep, but we need to change.
And you guys are actively involved in that, aren't you, in terms of the support for the rangers?
We recently launched something called the Ranger Relief Fund. It's at rangerrelief.org. And it's to do just that. We've been getting calls from reserves and conservation land on the ground here, farms that have rhinos, they have animals that need protecting, and they can't advertise that they need that, or you're telling the world that you don't have protection on these animals. You're telling the poachers where to find them. So we've just realized that there's this great need to help keep them employed. It's so that they can keep food on the table, they can help their community, and it's to protect the animals. So even though we've kind of set this first round of funding to be for a limited period, we do see this ongoing. And for the first $15,000 that comes in, we're going to be matching that. So this will be an ongoing thing, because I think that it's going to take at least a couple of years for tourism to get anywhere close to where it was before.
Absolutely. I mean, I've heard you guys speak on a recent interview, and you talked about the extent that you just referred to, the extent of tourism in Africa, broadly speaking. It's 9% of GDP. That's a huge amount to be taking that hit. And at the same time, when we talk about the holistic approach, which of course is a necessity when we're talking about effective long-term conservation, a holistic approach, a collaborative approach, it's all true. But as you've quite rightly pointed out, if you lose that one link in the chain, if you don't have a ranger in the territory with a gun on the ground, all of the other holistic elements become absolutely null and void. Yeah. So it's a really, really important thing you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we found with in our research for Rhino Review was that everyone talks about, there isn't a silver bullet to the protection of rhino, and they're right. But what we have been able to deduce is that perhaps, to continue the military metaphor, is that perhaps there is a silver magazine that has a multitude of identified bullets that combine give a very effective protection of rhino. And in that, we've been able to identify 11 key verticals of protection, and that ranges from rescue and rehabilitation, science and technology, habitat protection, law and legislation, and so the list goes on. But only one vertical in that is the anti-poaching side of it, is the militarized approach to conservation. And that in itself is quite an interesting debate. You know, does the militarized approach to the illegal wildlife trade work, or is it better in an intelligence-based approach? So if we take very loosely, I don't want to oversimplify it because I appreciate that the nuances of what I'm going to say are just so much more complex. But Southern Africa has got a very militarized approach to the onslaught of poaching. And I mean, the poaching, especially on rhino and increasingly on elephant down the East Africa and into Southern Africa, is more than anywhere else in the world at the moment. But what we've seen, you know, the more that we've spent time in places like India, where there is a far more intelligence-based approach. And what I mean by that is that they've got key personnel in the communities around those conservation areas that are providing information, that are providing intelligence over what is happening on the ground, that they're able to stop it before it happens. And in South Africa, we've got a different approach. We've got to sit inside the walls and kind of wait for it to come, you know, and then we can take it.
Right.
And I'm oversimplifying it to make the point, but the real point is that in all of that combined, if we've got the opportunity, which I believe we've got now coming out of COVID-19, and how we choose to be different as we evolve from this, is one of the biggest things we need to do is start addressing how do we grow, and I deliberately call it a conservation economy and not a wildlife economy, because that's the commoditization of a sentient being. And I'm not for that. We're not for that. What we believe is that the conservation economy allows us to have a broader discussion over the protection of that land, the services that exist on that land, that takes the discussion beyond land ownership and it goes into a space of entrepreneurship that is ancillary or secondary industries that support the growth of tourism, whether that's agriculture for the procurement for lodges in the area, if that's skills development, if that's mechanics, whatever it may be. And we're seeing a move towards that space, and we are hugely supportive of that, because I think in that we can change, we can shift the needle. You can't argue morality to someone that does not have hope, and when there is no hope, they're going to get a meal, get it. They're going to sell what they can. They're going to do what they can to look after their families. The same way you and I, you know. So
absolutely.
We've got to start addressing those socio-economic issues with the same degree of urgency that we have when we pick up a gun and we go on patrol. It's
interesting. You just mentioned. I mean, that's, by the way, I think. Thank you for explaining all of that, because I know you as you say deliberately simplified it for the sake of making the point, but I think also it's a really important point to get across so that people understand exactly what you're facing. And coming from you guys out there on the ground, literally facing this as your part of your day-to-day life, you know, you're imparting on us that true understanding, the deeper understanding you have of the real issues, because it's all too often. And I apologize because I think there's an ambulance about to go past, so we might be about to snoring dogs, sirens. You know, actually, it's gone the other way. We're good. I think
waiting for Kiki to pop in.
Well, yeah, it's strange because this is kind of her time of night, but there's no sign of her just yet. But we'll see. I'll be surprised if she didn't show up at some point. But yeah, it's all too easy for people a world away to say just shoot and kill, shoot to kill. You know, that doesn't resolve, as you guys well know, doesn't resolve the poaching crisis, because people willing to take that risk are lining up. And that's where, as you just rightly said, that you know, community intelligence is the way forward. And I've heard you talk very eloquently in another interview about the, you know, and I think you've already referred to this in this conversation as well. You know, if you want to uplift the people, uplift the land, and if you want to uplift the land, uplift the people. And it is that understanding of the two go hand in hand, and you can't fix one without the other. And essentially, you know, I see really intelligent conservation efforts where people are providing medical assistance to children in a village in return for intelligence, in the way that you've just described, which gives you the ability to preempt poaching rather than wait for it to come to you. So I think I'm really grateful to you for sharing that kind of insight into it from right there on the ground. It's because, I mean, you guys, your view of it, and especially for you, Shannon, I mean, it must be fascinating to go from, albeit you've been there now for a few years, but that transition from an outsider, obviously a concerned outsider and observer wanting to make a difference and do something about the problems, but to now be there and facing it and seeing it. I mean, what's that how has that shifted your perspective?
Before coming here, I had no idea that protecting animals meant protecting the people. I didn't realize there was such a link there.
Right. And
you'll have a piece of land, and all around that land are villages, people living. And quite often when you talk to these people, they've never even seen the animals. They've never been inside the fences.
Right.
They don't know what's happening in there, so they're not invested. They don't have any reason to care. They're just worrying about their family, putting food on the table themselves. Why should they care about an animal in there? Because it means nothing to them.
Absolutely.
So you can't blame them for not caring. But what we see that works really well is when that piece of land with those animals bring these people in. And I don't mean bring them in to show them the animals. That's part of it. But bring them in and make them invested in it. Make it part of their livelihood. So if they want to be a mechanic, have them be a mechanic for that park, have them work on the vehicles in that park. Now their job depends on tourism. It's on that park doing well and people coming to see those animals. And now those animals do mean livelihood for them. And you can do this in every single sector, and you can bring all of these people in so that they have a vested interest in what's happening. And in that process, they get to see the animals, know the animals, understand their behavior, and then they start to love them because they're there and they get to see them and they're a part of something. They're a part of a bigger community now. And that's something that I had no idea about before. Oh, yes! Oh, it's so cute. Oh, that's so awesome. Wow, what a blessing.
I know, right? I'm just so lucky. Hi, sweetheart. Nice to see you. You're going out live to the whole world.
Oh, you do just like that's a 24/7 live cam on her.
There she goes.
Oh, that is so cute.
Well done.
And just for say again.
What is she eating? What kind of nuts is she eating?
She's got an organic mixed selection from Whole Foods.
Of course she does.
Awesome.
I'd also climb through your window.
Yeah.
She's building muscle. Let me tell you. Now, just for anyone who's just joined us, or joined us, after I'd already mentioned Kiki, I feel it's important to say, because of the content, the nature of the details, the issues that Simon and Shannon are very kindly sharing with us. Rest assured, I wouldn't spin the camera around on a squirrel without their blessing. I had their blessing, and as you could see from their reactions, it was all very much what we wanted to. The only reason, because my monitor actually covers my view of the table where she eats, literally. Yeah. And I hear the little nuts. I hear the clink of the nuts on the plate. So yeah, you'll see me do this from time to time. That's just a Kiki check. So, one of the things that I really wanted to touch upon while we have a chance to is you've talked about tourism. We've talked about, lodges and sustainability and all of the and you've just also touched upon this indirectly with your reference to villages and communities around outside of conservation areas or national parks. And as you quite rightly said, a lot of these people have never and will never see the animals that we'll pay thousands of pounds or dollars to go see. And all they do see, it's not just a case of they won't see the animals. There's a level of understandable resentment, because what they do see while they're sitting there living in abject poverty is a tinted window 4-wheel drive Land Cruiser goes steaming by, kicking up some dust on the way into the park that they know costs $1,000 a night to stay in.
Right.
You know, so this is what we're dealing with.
I mean, they're seeing animals that have veterinary care, they have food, they have water, medicine, just everything they need, and they don't. And how is that fair? You know?
Right. Absolutely.
So they're absolutely right in their thinking. And it's a lot of places will just say, well, we'll build a well for the community and we'll just we'll build a school and be done with it. But it's so much more than that. That is important in everything else. You have to bring them into it. That's why our dream and our fourth pillar of the table, our fourth leg, is our land and community project. And it's doing it just that.
Right.
We're looking to identify the piece of land that we can build this project on and bring those communities in and upskill the community. Whatever it is, we want to go to them. What is your dream? What do you want to do? Let us help you get the schooling you need, get the education to do just that, and let us help you create your own business. Something that you can pass down from generation to generation. So it's not just you're getting hired as an employee, you're the owner. You know, I think that's really important. And they have such a sense of pride of that. And so we want to build a lodge. And if I have my way, it'll be a vegan lodge. That's what I want. So there'll be no skins on the floor, no heads on the wall. I don't want any of that.
No leather couches.
No leather couches. But we need a place where we can bring people in and let them be a part of conservation. Yes, you come, you stay with us. If you want to go out with the rangers on patrol, you go out. We will build a rhino sanctuary there. If you want to go and feed the rhinos, if there's a baby that needs 24-hour bottle care, you can go and help with the babies. Like, we want people to get involved and be hands-on. It's not just about going in a vehicle and looking at animals anymore. It's participating. We want to build a safe haven for the animals. And when you protect a piece of land, you're protecting everything within that land. It's not just one species, one animal. It's all of the animals, the whole ecosystem. It's the plants and all the bugs. And to me, there's nothing better than going out with rangers that can tell you every plant, every tree, the medicine it's used for, and you get to know the land. Right. And that's what a lot of these people in these communities, they know this stuff so well. They just inherently know. Bring them in, let them show people around, and let them be proud of their culture. This is their culture that they've grown up with and they love. And I want them to be able to show that off to people. You know, I think it's just really important.
I think it's, there are a couple of themes that Shannon's touched on there, and to try and ring fence some principles that we're trying to engage on these things with is that on the one hand, I think that, and I certainly don't say any of this as a unilateral observation across the industry. I think that there are some unbelievable organizations, safari and lodge operations, that are doing some of the most exemplary community work that form a model and an inspiration for people like us to enter this space. So we certainly don't have the answers. We need to learn as we go. But there are some principles that we need to take through with this. And I think that the one is in a lot of instances, the local communities have been a beneficiary of the business. And I think that we need to change the discussion so that there are participants in that business and stakeholders in that business. And not in a singular way of just saying, what is the title deed on the land? But what is the commercial endeavor that commercializes that land, and what is their route within that trajectory of the business? Where is their seat around the table? And I know that there are 1,000,001 challenges and nuances to that, and we are speaking in quite a utopian statement here. But damn it, we have to, because if we're not going to challenge the status quo, if we're not going to try and do things differently, then we cannot expect anything to change. And we need to take that. And I think that there is a real opportunity when we don't just see a safari operation for where people can meet animals and meet the wild, but where people can meet people. Because I think there is a challenge, and there are a lot of really good solutions to this from people in the tourism space that have been doing this for forever and a day, that it's transcending the idea of a safari being quite voyeuristic. Because it really is. You come to the back of a game viewing vehicle, and you drive through, and you look out from the vehicle, and you look at Africa, or you look at this beautiful space, and then you go. And what we want to do is to try and find that space of someone that might have been to Africa 2 or 3 times before and is now going, you know what, I actually want to get out the vehicle. I want to get mud on my boots. I get it. I've seen everything. I've ticked. And they live in there's a saying here that says, you come for the animals, but you come back for the people. And we want to bridge that divide and find ways and experiment with ways and learn different ways of connecting those narratives and those stories. Because I think in there, there's an alchemy that's quite exciting.
Wow, it's always the only challenging part of these interviews I find is that bringing them to a close, because I don't want to stop talking to you guys about this stuff, because click. That would be so if I was that committed to the comedy, but I'm not. But look, what you guys between you have shared and said, I mean, I've literally got, I'm not just saying this, I've got a page full of notes that I've written I wanted to talk to you about, and we'll have you back to do just that. But I feel like what you've done is you've demonstrated to people what the reason why I brought you on as guests, the reason I wanted people to see the considered, intelligent approach, the humility you guys have to know that you don't know all the answers, but you're damn well going to find them, and take the right course of action, not just an opinion-based course of action. And the combination of that with the absolute empathy that you both exude, and the passion that you have for what you do. I can tell you right now from all the comments which you guys I know would have seen, that you're going to have a lot of customers for your lodge.
Yay! Yes.
That's and thank you for Rudy who pointed out that it was Mark Ruffalo who had coined the phrase.
Thank you.
Disposable travel. This for me is indisposable travel. I need to go to that lodge, and I would love to join you guys there so I wish you luck in setting it up. I hope that you do. Just before we go, 2 quick things. One is, I always forget to say this before the start of a broadcast. When I stop the live broadcast, I can still talk to you guys, and I will. So don't hang up, because I'd love to say goodbye. But before you guys who are watching go, and let's just see if no Kiki at the moment. On Wednesday at 7 p.m. that's UK time, 11 a.m. Pacific, and 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be, my guest will be Jackie Howe, who runs the absolutely beautiful, spiritually evolved Springwood Mindfulness Sanctuary, which is a genuinely rewilded area of land where she houses a herd of 9 horses, ponies, and donkeys who are bonded together. It's such a beautiful, beautiful setup. It's a beautiful place, and it's a mindfulness sanctuary in the sense that she talks about the oneness that I've heard you guys talk about tonight as well, about the way that everything's connected, about the people and the land and the animals, and it's all one thing we have to look at holistically. And Jackie understands this as well. So for you guys, and of course Simon and Shannon as well, if you'd like to join us at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, Jackie Howe will be right here, so please do come back for that. But for you guys, from the bottom, and for Peanut, little snoring Peanut, little snoring. Look at her little face. She's like, "What's happening?
What are we doing awake?
What's going on? Why are we still here? Who's this guy? And what's that accent?"
It's more like, "Dad, will you shut up? I'm trying to sleep."
I'm trying to sleep. So listen, guys, as always, Giles, my legendary co-director on Food for Thought, did it again. See, I get the wrong hand every single time. He has shared the links that Shannon and Simon have been talking about. Please visit. Please follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Give them your support. You'll see exactly the campaigns, projects, educational items that they've talked about. Jump on it. It's incredible. And from I know on behalf of a lot of the people watching, and from myself, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for what you guys are doing, because as I said at the beginning, I only have guests on that inspire me, and you guys do that. You really inspire me, and you empower people. And I'm so grateful to you for what you do and for what the foundation does. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just say that I had a friend that passed recently and came back and was able to communicate with his loved one. And one of the things that she told me that he said that keeps ringing in my ear is that when you cross over, when you die, what they want to see is that you've helped people and you've helped animals, and what have you done on this planet to be there for others and to help others. And I think that the world has such a reset right now, and there's no better time than today. And if you haven't started that journey, start it now. And whatever that may be for you, whatever your passion is, pursue it. The universe will support you and will guide you. And I really, truly believe that we're here to love, to help each other. And there is a oneness with people, animals, plants. We're all an ecosystem, and we're all in this together. And I think that we will all find a lot more happiness when we're supporting each other and helping each other, and not entertaining those feelings of jealousy and competition and all of these negative emotions, but start embracing peace and love and happiness and compassion and abundance. And I really think that's the key to life. And if every single day, even if it's just one thing that you can find to do in that realm, and maybe it's just opening the door for someone or reaching out to someone you haven't talked to in a long time because we're all stuck at home right now, whatever it may be, go inside and find what it is for you and just do something every single day.
What an absolutely beautiful and profoundly important message to thank you, as per all the comments. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what an incredible, can you just all imagine a world where that was the focus, where that was the priority? Mm-hmm. So with that, guys, thank you again. Thank you so much for everything. Don't forget, don't hang up. And you guys,
thank you guys.
As for everyone else, I'm about to hang up on you, and I apologize for that. I wish we could stay and chat for a lot longer, but thank you so much for being part of this. It's been another incredibly, I think, inspiring and beautiful conversation, and I hope you'll join me for the next one. So we'll see you Wednesday at 7 p.m. and have a great day or great night wherever you are. Spread the love and listen to Shannon's words. That was beautiful. Thank you, and good night.